Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture. We're on the eve of America's 248th birthday. In a manner of speaking, the 248th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And today we're going to be talking about the musical version of that story. Yes, in 1972, 4 years shy of the Bicentennial, Columbia Pictures released a movie musical about the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And the weirdest thing about it is, it's pretty awesome. Now, I discovered this film, so to speak, in high school. Government class. I had a government teacher who was an interesting guy, was into UFOs, was definitely a libertarian, because at one point he had a guy come in to speak to the class who was basically cosplaying as Benjamin Franklin and playing him as a character so we could ask questions of Benjamin Franklin. It was an interesting class. And so one day we're going to be watching 1776. It's a musical about the Declaration of Independence. And like most people in the class, I thought, what? Okay, whatever. Well, I mean, watching a movie in class was always better than actually having to learn something. And like many times in my scholastic career, something that I thought I was going to hate or not care about at all ends up being something that I really, really love. Such is 1776. The movie is based on a book written by Peter Stone in 1969 that was written for a Broadway musical of the same name. So this is a Broadway musical. It's a stage play. It feels like a stage play in the way that it's filmed, and that's, in my opinion, a good thing, although I guess if you don't like plays, if you don't like the theater, maybe it's a bad thing. I think it's beautifully filmed. Great costumes. You notice the image here is sort of widescreen and makes it difficult to set this shot up, but it's worth it because they really make use of that widescreen in this film. It's a great looking film. And one of the nice things about it is, even though it's a fictionalized account of the process that led up to the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and in fact, the writing of it, it does use bits and pieces from the memoirs of the people who were involved. It uses some genuine quotes from the people who were involved. And I think most importantly, though, it takes people who were given sort of a folkloric, legendary status at certain points in American history. And that was important at those points in American history. But by the 1970s, people had different attitudes. And I think what they needed to do was see these men, and a couple women, but mostly these men, made human. And in being human, it sort of actually amplifies the importance and the power of what they did. And you definitely get this. And of course, it's a musical. So musicals are sort of, they take the emotion and the drama of reality and distill it so you get a really concentrated shot of it. All right. So let's take a look at this movie. Now, I'm not worrying about spoilers because, spoiler alert, the Declaration of Independence was written and it was actually voted in by the Continental Congress. So if you don't know how this thing ends, well, maybe you need to pay a little more attention to history. I will say, though, that the way they stage this, you're actually nervous that it might not pass. As you're getting closer to the end of the film, they do a really good job with that and of giving you the sense of that this was not a sure thing. That what happened was absolutely not a sure thing. It was difficult to get it passed. Okay. So let's take a look at this. We begin with John Adams. Now, John Adams is central to this telling of the story. He is played by the great William Daniels, who, you got a lot of Broadway and stage actors in this. Most of them had careers in television. And of course, William Daniels was on St. Elsewhere, great role. And for a lot of the fellow geeks that maybe watch this channel, he's the voice of KITT on Knight Rider. It's probably not, something he felt to be his most important role, but he certainly is beloved by it. So a cantankerous and somewhat angry John Adams stomps down the stairs into the Continental Congress. And you see many of these members all sitting around, gabbing, talking. John Adams is a man of action, persistence. He wants the Congress to declare independence from Great Britain. And he's not a patient man. And so he roars in and he says, and again, he's fantastic in this movie. What I'm going to do his quote, and I don't have his voice, so I can't do it the way he does it. It is I don't know if it sounds anything like John Adams, but it is perfect for the character of John Adams. He says, I have come to the conclusion that one useless man is called the disgrace, that two are called a law firm, and that three or more become a Congress. And by God, I have had this Congress for 10 years. King George and his parliament have gulled, cullied, and diddled these colonies with their illegal taxes, Stamp Acts, Townsend Acts, Sugar Acts, Tea Acts. And when we dared stand up like men, they have stopped our trade, seized our ships, blockaded our ports, burned our towns, and spilled our blood. And still, this Congress refuses to grant any of my proposals on independence, even so much as the courtesy of open debate. Good God, what in hell are you waiting for? He's not a real subtle guy. And one of the things we discover about John Adams, and this leads to our first musical number, which is called Sit Down, John, is that everybody's had just about enough of John Adams pushing for independence. Now, some of these delegates are for independence, but they're still tired of John Adams. And this is something that is known about John Adams. He was often considered to be annoying. And he is beautifully annoying, as played by Daniels. So we get a long musical number of Sit Down, John, and he's just yelling for independence. And he finally leaves, walks out onto this summer night in Philadelphia. It is sweltering, and of course, no air conditioning, but also these guys wear a lot of layers. So they're hot, and that probably leads to the annoyance. And he sees in his mind's eye his wife, Abigail Adams, also rightly well known as an important inspiration to him and somebody who she was an intellectual woman. She was smart. She was wise. And so we have another musical number as he speaks with Abigail from afar. Now, this would actually be letters written between the two of them. But they stage it here as these musical numbers where initially you see it kind of in that hazy vision. And then it places the two of them next to each other on his farm in Massachusetts. And she's talking about all the problems that they're having, and he's talking about all the problems that he's having, and that they need saltpeter, etc. And it's a really nice scene, and it's important because of that relationship, really key to the founding of the United States of America. It is. Now we move at the end of that to a little park near the Independence Hall. And we're going to meet one of the members of the Virginia delegation. Ben Franklin is in the park having his portrait painted. He's speaking with John Adams. And they say, we need to get this vote for independence moving ahead. And key to that is Virginia. Now, obviously, the delegates from Virginia approve. The Virginia, well, I believe it was the House of Burgesses. I was going to say legislature. I think it's the House of Burgesses. Had not approved this measure. So they send Henry Lee of the Lees of Virginia, and if you know, like a Robert E. Lee, I believe he was related to them. Very important family in Virginia. And there's this big raucous number of him talking about how great the Lees are. It's kind of funny. It's kind of goofy. But it is decided that he's going to ride for Virginia from Philadelphia and get this approved in Virginia so they can get Virginia on board and they can at least force some debate on this issue. And it works. And that leads them to their next problem. If they're going to debate the issue, they need to have a declaration written. Who's going to write this declaration? Well, it isn't going to be John Adams because, as they've said, everybody hates him. And they'll vote against it just because he wrote it. So there's this little committee on this declaration. And they do a musical number with these various men. Who's it going to come down to? Who's going to do it? They're passing a quill. And each one explains why he must not do it. And it obviously comes down to Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson has a problem. He's got a new wife at home. And, well, to put it mildly, he's horny. And nothing's happening in Congress. And he wants to go home. You know? And what was the line at the end of Clue? With Mr. Body, well, it wasn't Mr. the Butler. The Butler is the FBI agent. No, I'm telling it wrong. It was Mr. Green, who they all thought was gay, and his last line as he's leaving is, "I'm going to go home and have sex with my wife." Well, that's what Thomas Jefferson wants to do. And as I said, you see here where we're humanizing these characters. We're talking about them as human beings, not as mythical creatures who wrote the Declaration of Independence. Now, Thomas Jefferson, played by Ken Howard, best known from The White Shadow, plays the role pretty well in this. Jefferson's an interesting character. He's not fiery. He's very reserved. Important, but very reserved. Benjamin Franklin, wise man that he is, has the idea of having his wife brought to Philadelphia so he doesn't have to leave. And Blythe Danner plays Martha Jefferson. Very funny scene as they're being, as Adams and Benjamin Franklin are being introduced to her, even though they had met the day before and she didn't even know they were there. Funny stuff, as, you know, Ben Franklin was not a prudish man. John Adams maybe more so. But good stuff. There's a lot of great dialogue in this film. It's very well written. A lot of fun dialogue, a lot of great quotes. I'm not going to do the vast majority of them here. There are a couple that I will key in on. The parts are all played very, very well. And so at this point, we get a little musical number. As you hear in the background, Thomas Jefferson playing the violin, and a little dance, a sort of a minuet with Adams and Franklin and Martha Jefferson. And then the Declaration is written. Now, one of the nice things about this film is that we do see the great men of the period. And we do see them as human beings, flawed, very human, very grounded. We also see the common man, and primarily in the form of the sort of custodian of the hall, who tears the page off of the calendar as we proceed through these days, which is a really nice way to go from scene to scene. Brings rum for a lot of rum for one of the members of the Congress, and sort of interjects every so often as just a normal person. And we also have this young man who is bringing dispatches on behalf of General Washington to the Congress. They're not happy dispatches. He's got a ragtag army with no discipline and not enough supplies. He's facing almost insurmountable odds as the British are gathering to take New York. And he's bringing, so he tromps in, and we do get a nice scene with them where they're talking, and this boy sings about seeing action for the first time in Massachusetts and seeing friends of his die. It's a really beautiful piece of work, beautiful song. It's done with this lighting that's sort of that almost twilight sort of lighting in this room. And it's an opportunity to see how all of this, the deliberations, the actions of these great men are falling on just normal people as well. Very beautiful. The songs, some of them are kind of goofy in this movie, and a couple of them are very powerful. So finally, and you'll notice there, we see John Hancock, who's the president of the Congress, played by David Ford, who maybe will be best known to a lot of people as from Dark Shadows, as Sam Evans, a sort of alcoholic painter who's involved in a lot of stuff, who is later replaced by a different actor. He's very good. And he's very good as John Hancock, trying to keep everything going. But finally, the Declaration as written is read to the Congress. And you don't hear the whole thing read, because as he's reading it, Adams and Franklin and Jefferson leave the room for a musical number, of course, where they talk about birthing this new nation as in birthing a bird from an egg. And we get a little bit of Jefferson wanting the nation's symbol to be a dove, Adams wanting it to be an eagle, and of course Benjamin Franklin wanting it to be a turkey. It's a fun little number. The movie's beautifully shot. You can see here. It's just really well shot. It retains that kind of intimate feeling of a play, while still taking advantage of the movie screen. And it's a nice moment to see these characters, who we will know that later in life, Adams and Jefferson are not good friends. They will end up dying on the exact same day. But we see them for that moment as allies. And so they return as they finish reading the Declaration. And this is one of the nice things about this film. Obviously, this is one of the most important documents ever written. It launches a whole new nation, a revolution of sorts over the entire world. So obviously, all of the delegates there are profoundly impressed by these powerful words. Well, no, immediately, everybody wants to start making changes. Remember, this is a Congress. It's not a law, but it is an act of this Congress. And that means debate, and it means negotiation. And so we go through numerous changes as Jefferson is seeing this work that he's put together taken apart. And some of these things people want changed are rather minor. Some more so. There's another great John Adams line, as one person should we mention Parliament in this declaration? Should we mention Parliament? That could win us enemies in Parliament. It could be useful to have Parliament, on our side as we do this, because remember, a lot of these people still really kind of hold out hope that we're going to make up with Great Britain, that King George is going to back down, and it's all going to be well. And so the John Adams line was, "This is a revolution, damn it. We're going to have to offend somebody." You just get that fire from Adams all through this thing. So the most important objection to the language comes from South Carolina and the South. Delegate Edward Rutledge, who is played by John Cullum, who I best know as Holling Vancouver from Northern Exposure. And believe me, I had to watch this movie several times before it clicked. I'm like, oh my God, that's Holling. I can't believe it. Of course, their objection is to the mention of slavery being one of the crimes committed by King George. They don't want that there. Now, overall, most of the delegations at this point, in theory, support the Declaration of Independence. One does not, and that's Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has 3 delegates. All of the colonies do. Of course, one of them is Benjamin Franklin. The other one is, hopefully I'm getting his name right, James Dickinson. I believe it was James. And the third is, I'm looking at my screen right now because I had it written down, by golly, somewhere. Oh, there we go. James Wilson. Okay. John Dickinson, James Wilson. Okay. Dickinson is against independence. He wants a rapprochement with Great Britain. He's a wealthy landowner. He doesn't want to shake things up. He's sort of an aristocrat. James Wilson is a judge who is kind of mousy and kind of meek and goes along with Dickinson. Franklin, of course, is the one who is for independence from Pennsylvania. So they already got the Pennsylvania problem. But now the entire South is ready to walk out. And it has been decided. And Adams was against this, but Hancock, also from the Massachusetts delegation, agreed with it. There must be no vote against declaring independence. It's got to be unanimous. Because realistically, they can't drag colonies into this war who don't want to be there. They could never trust them. They could never rely on them. They've all got to be in on this thing. So they're going to have to deal with Pennsylvania, but now the whole South is ready to walk out over this question of slavery. And this is where we get a really powerful performance from Cullum as Rutledge. We also get one of the more powerful songs because obviously Adams, Franklin are abolitionists. Jefferson, in theory, is an abolitionist, although we know that he never does free the slaves that he owns, to his discredit, frankly. But the Southerners are saying we're not going to vote for this if that language is in there, and the abolitionists, the northern colonies, are dead set opposed to taking that out because they do believe slavery to be wrong, although some of them still have slaves. And we get a song where Rutledge points out the part that New England takes in the slave trade. And it is one hell of a song. Really well done by him. Again, the lighting shifts, and it's a really powerful moment. And I'd say one of the best songs in the film, in the musical. And it leaves the northern colonies rather speechless, because they know they're implicit in this whole thing. Now, that's one little problem I have with this, because yes, they have taken part in the slave trade, but they're also willing to stop. So I don't think it's really the moral win that it appears to be here of you're guilty too. Yeah, they're guilty too, but it's something they will actually want to, at least some of them, want to end as opposed to preserve. But it's a hell of a moment. And Adams is adamant that the language stays. And so we get a soul-searching moment for him. Because this is it. This is the end of everything he's worked for. And he doesn't feel in his heart he can give up on this. And here's an image that comes from earlier in the film, because apparently I didn't put it in the right place in my slideshow. So it comes down to the day of the vote. And we start getting votes from colonies, and it comes down to, well, North Carolina, who defers to South Carolina. And Rutledge says, what about it, Adams? You must believe I will do this thing. And Adams is pissed. And Franklin is arguing with him, and he throws it in his face about, abolition. And he says, listen, I created the first abolition society on this continent. Don't tell me about abolition. Adams says to Franklin, and this is one of my favorite quotes from Franklin in the film. Mark me, Franklin, if we give in on this issue, posterity will never forgive us. Now think about that, because here we are, 248 years later, and this is still an issue. And Franklin responds, that's probably true, but we won't hear a thing. We'll be long gone. Besides, what would posterity think we were? Demigods? We're men. No more, no less, trying to get a nation started against greater odds than a more generous God would have allowed. First things first, John, independence. America, if we don't secure that, what difference will the rest make? I love that term. What do they think we were? Demigods? Well, at times that's kind of exactly what they were treated as in our history books. And that's why I think films like this are important. They're human beings. They made compromises. They didn't like the compromises, but they made them. And there are people who will never forgive them, as Adams said. Maybe that's a hard thing to forgive, and maybe it's not. But it's a great line, and it's well said. I don't know if that comes from some of his letters, quotations. We get a lot of Franklin quotations in the story, and they're pretty well done and pretty funny. Adams relents. He scratches it out. And the South votes for independence. Now, there is one abstention, New York. New York abstains politely. Always New York abstains politely. The delegate from New York, Lewis Morris, is played by Howard Kane, who, again, a lot of TV fans will remember as Major Hochstetter from Hogan's Heroes. Another one that you go, I know this guy, but what do I know this guy from? Because we have the wigs and we have the costumes, and you don't always know. So it comes down to it. Now, Pennsylvania had been asked for their vote earlier. Franklin is arguing with them still. It says, come to us later, come to us after. So now it comes down to Pennsylvania. And Dickinson says, well, I'm afraid this compromise you've made was for nothing, because you know how we're going to vote. So we get a little maneuvering from Franklin. He says, I want I'm trying to think what the term is, but I want each member of the delegation to decide how they're going to vote, which is appropriate. Franklin votes yes. Dickinson votes no. It all now comes down to James Wilson. The entire question of American independence comes down to this one man. And that's something that he didn't bargain for. He doesn't want fame. He doesn't want the responsibility. And so he decides he's going to vote yes. And Dickinson can't believe it. But as he explains, if I vote no, I'm the man who single-handedly ended American independence. But if I vote yes, I'm just one man amongst many. And so the final vote is no votes against, 12 votes for. The motion is carried. Dickinson asks, is this how a nation is born? A nobody who's afraid of fame? Franklin says, apparently so. And so we tear away the pages as we head to July 4th. We get to see John Hancock put his signature on. There's a little bit more debate coming from John Adams this time, who points out, Mr. Jefferson, inalienable rights. The word is unalienable. To which Jefferson disagrees. To which Adams makes sure he knows that I attended Harvard. And Jefferson says, I attended William and Mary. It stays inalienable. John Adams relents. And then under his breath says, I'll just talk to the printer later. And so there's a little bit more of this, and there's a great line from Hancock saying, may I remind everybody that if the British were to bust in right now, I'm the only one who signed his damn name to this document. Can we please sign? And so we close out July 4th with each man being called, coming up, signing his name, as we get this slow pan out of the room and these different delegates. And it's a really great shot, really beautifully done. And you get the tolling of the Liberty Bell. And it doesn't end with everybody, yay, we're into it. Because they've also had news from Washington that New York has been taken, that he has gotten Delegate Morris's wife and children out, except 2 of his sons have joined the Continental Army, at which point he says, change New York's vote to yes. The hell with it. I don't care what. He hadn't heard from his legislature. I don't give a crap. Vote yes, which makes it truly unanimous. But they know now what they face. They've declared independence. They have a war to win. And understand, under almost no means should the United States have won the Revolutionary War. It's absurd that we won the Revolutionary War, which is why some of us think there was maybe a little bit of divine intervention involved. did win the war. But they don't know this, and that's how it ends in a very somber way, because these men have all now, they put it all on the line. It can all fall apart now for them. It's a really well done movie. It's very powerful. And let's end on a sort of happy note. This is a movie review, but you know I like to talk about toys. Let's take a look at this. Oops, I got it. Hero of the American Revolution, Benjamin Franklin. I got this a while back. I didn't necessarily want to do an entire video. And so it occurred to me, this is months ago, that he would go well with a review of 1776 for July 4th. So let's hold this little dude up here. Here we go. I believe he might have been produced around the time of the Bicentennial. 1976, the Bicentennial year, was huge. Everything was Bicentennial. Everything was American Revolution. It was something to see. To think that in just a couple years, we're going to be the 250th birthday of the United States. In some tough times. We'll see what happens. But from a different time period, when a lot of Americans were starting to appreciate what they had in this country, given the fact that there was a very determined large country out there that wanted to essentially wipe us off the face of the earth. And people had gone through some rough stuff in the late 60s and 70s. And some of that novelty was wearing off, and people were starting to come to terms with the flawed nature of the country, but also its promise and its potential. Maybe we'll do so. Again, maybe a young generation right now is doing that as well. And a film like this is a great way to think about these things, because like I said, it looks at the people involved as human beings. It hits some very important issues and the compromises they had to make. But also, you understand why this enterprise they were engaging on was so very important to them. So, as we head into the 4th of July holiday, or maybe if you don't have time on the 4th of July for a movie, you can find time afterwards. You might want to give 1776 a try. It is playing at the moment that I'm recording this, which is a couple weeks ahead of time, to be honest. It is free on Tubi. Now, a lot of times things like this, they're not free anymore on the day or the week that everybody wants to watch them. But I do believe it's also available on Prime Video for rental. So it is out there. Maybe take some time, watch 1776. It's kind of crazy. It's a musical, but it's got some fantastic performances and hits some really important notes and may make you a little more in touch with the Founding Fathers. It's a movie I really love that I didn't expect to really love. And it gets high recommendation from me. Give it a try. And that'll do it for this review. So, what say you? Have you seen this movie? Do you like it? Are you a fan at all of musicals? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. If you enjoyed this video, please like, maybe think about subscribing, sharing with a friend. Helps my little channel grow, and I do deeply appreciate it. But until next time, God bless everyone. Please be kind to one another. Try to have some fun. Enjoy the 4th of July, whether you're American or not. Hey, baby, it's about independence, man. It's about basic human rights, not getting stomped on. Even if you're not American, I think a lot of you out there can appreciate that. And look, everybody on earth is a potential American. Don't forget that. But especially if you're an American, enjoy your 4th of July holiday. Take a moment to think about what it all means to be an American while you're grilling your hot dogs and setting off fireworks. But enjoy the holiday. I'll see you again soon, I hope, in Dad's Den of pop culture. Bye-bye.